past weekend, the latest MCU team-up movie, Thunderbolts, dropped in theaters. So today we're going to stop and rank every MCU Avengers movie from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your ranking of every Marvel Avengers movie. My list is not the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. As we go into this will contain spoilers for Thunderbolts, so if you haven't seen Thunderbolts yet, and if you haven't been on the internet this past week, you have been appropriately warned, and let's get started. Coming in last place, Avengers Age of Ultron. To be perfectly clear, I think that this is a good movie. It's a flawed movie, but I think it has a lot of great elements to it. Individual scenes, sequences, dialogue moments, action bits are just as strong, if not better, than in the first movie. I think that the costumes here look better, and in particular, the cinematography is much more cinematic in this film versus the first movie. So there's things here that are way better than the first film. But it's a movie that swings for the fences. It is an Avengers event film, and a lot of people were disappointed by it and don't feel it lived up to its potential. So it leaves a lot of people disappointed, kind of including myself to some extent. But disappointed does not mean bad. I don't think this is remotely bottom tier MCU, anything like that. It's just a movie that doesn't fully live up to the Avengers brand. And I think the reason for that is it just has such rushed and confused storytelling, where it's a movie that right out of the gate, it feels like we're hopping into the third act of a movie that we haven't seen, that sets up the twins being the only survivors of an experiment, Hydra doing these experiments, Tony coming out of retirement. And there's this whole backstory that leads into this opening sequence, and we are just right in on the action and trying to piece together exactly what's going on as we're trying to get Loki's scepter. And the whole movie kind of has that feeling to it, that we're rushing through plot points. The creation of Ultron, I mean, it just happened so fast. We're talking about doing it, and then he shows up at a party almost immediately afterwards, because we're just having so many plot points that we need to get through. And we kind of know why. The original cut of this movie was much longer, and there was this negotiation back and forth between Joss Whedon, who really wanted to keep all of this stuff at Clint's farm with the family and the character moments, and Marvel Studios who were telling him he had to include all of this setup and Thor's hot tub time machine with all the Ragnarok visions. He had to include all of that. That was the compromise, and Joss Whedon openly stated he wanted this movie to be shorter than the first film. So you have a movie with a much more layered and complex storyline than the original Avengers, with multiple subplots that both sides were fighting to keep included, and you're trying to keep it as tight as possible. And when you do that, it requires that you do the most bare bones version of the storytelling, because you're not going to trim out Hulk versus Hulkbuster. You're not going to trim out the Avengers versus Ultron. So it's the story itself which has to be told in the most efficient, quick way possible. And that makes it the most confusing film in the MCU, because it's constantly moving through plot points and you're like, wait, what were they trying to do? What did Wanda just do? Why are they at this place? Because we don't pause to properly explain everything. We just do it, and the audience members have to piece it together. It's not a confusing plot line on paper, but the storytelling makes it confusing. There's always this balance between, if you over-explain things, the audience thinks you're treating them like they're stupid. If you under-explain things, the audience is confused. You want that perfect balance of giving them just the right amount of information where you're not talking down to them, but they can follow what's happening. And I think this movie gets the ratio wrong, because they were trying to keep it as short as possible while trying to cram so much stuff into it. And you just have issues because of that, where things are not explained properly, where little segments clearly seem cut out to just be so quick moving that it hurts the overall film that has so many great elements in it. And I wish, or if at some point in time, we would get kind of the version of this movie that is 20, 30 minutes longer, that is allowed to properly tell its story, set everything up, and let it play most naturally, not most efficiently. In fifth, new Avengers, the Thunderbolts. And because of the final twist of this movie, combined with the rebrand of the film after its release, that is why we are getting this particular ranking, because we now have a new Avengers movie. We just didn't know we were getting a new Avengers movie. And while this is in fifth place, I think that this is absolutely one of the best films post-Endgame. This is a movie that actually feels like a movie, just not the latest installation of the MCU, not a nostalgia fest, not a Frankenstein's monster of reshoots. Feels like they had a clear vision for what they wanted to do with this film and what they wanted to explore. And it just made it so refreshing. As it turns out, I've actually seen this movie 3 times already, and if my daughters wanted to go see it, I'd go see it another time, because it just reminded me of a different era of MCU films that were just better constructed and about something and about the characters. And that's what this movie is, that it's one of the most character-based MCU films that we've ever gotten, because from the very first shot, it is so overtly about depression, mental health, purpose, regret. And that's not a casual thing. It's not on the back burner. It's central to the whole movie. Each character is processing through their regrets and their trauma and feel like losers. And in storytelling, when developing characters, you want to find characters that need to go on this specific journey. This movie needs to exist for that character to become that better version of themselves, or choose, if it's a tragedy, choose the wrong choice to become the worst version of themselves. And that's what this movie's all about, is creating a scenario where this batch of losers, the D-list, find family. And suddenly the D-list becomes the A-list. Or the Avengers maybe become the B-Vengers, but they've found their place and their redemptive path, while doing some things with the MCU that we've never seen before in a very surrealist third act. Even some of the things that the director talked about that were influences on what he was trying to do while still doing a Marvel movie. That's when you get interesting films, that it's not just a Marvel movie influenced by past Marvel movies. It's a Marvel movie pulling in these outside inspirations.
And we had been looking at references from Bean John Malkovich and early Gondry stuff, just for like how kind of some of our more surrealist sequences feel. So there was this idea of trying to have it be as in camera as possible.
Even to the level that they joked about this one being like the A24 movie of Marvel. I mean, it's nothing like an A24 movie, but pulling in those inspirations, that influence, gives it its own fresh new flavor. It's still funny. It's still entertaining. There's still cool action and a lot of practical stunt work with Florence Pugh jumping off a building, as well as practical sets, even in a surrealist world.
There's a lot of grounded stuff in this movie and a lot of grounded action. There is a whole surrealist side to the film, and I think that traditionally in this world you might, lean pretty hard on visual effects to do that. Close to it in camera, that's just sort of augmented by effects.
Combined with all of these interesting new inspirations that just made for something that's familiar but still fresh and interesting, and it pulled big emotions out of me as it was actually exploring something. In fourth, the Avengers, or Avengers Assemble, depending on which part of the world that you live in. And if you weren't there in 2012, this movie can feel very quaint, because since then, we've done much more sophisticated team-up movies, and that kind of became commonplace. They built on the foundation laid by this movie and took things to bigger and grander levels. But what you have to understand is when this movie came out, we'd never had a team-up movie like this before that took multiple different big blockbuster franchises with very different tones. If you're talking about Iron Man, present day, Earth, science fiction, robot suit movie, 1940s Captain America movie, Thor, space opera, fish out of water comedy, and it pulled them all together seamlessly. and cohesively.
Kevin Feige had stepped into the role of running Marvel and really kind of, he imposed a kind of clarity of tone across those movies that like sort of figured out the trickiest thing, which is like, how do you balance a movie where you got people wearing like, pajamas and have superpowers, and how seriously do you take it, and how much humor is in it, and how much can you wink at the audience, and what does the action have to look like?
And it created this really exciting experience of like, wait, we really can have a Marvel Cinematic Universe with all these very different characters populating the same world and coming together every few years. And it was so satisfying and fun. When you're doing it the first time, you don't need to have the most sophisticated, complicated plot. You can have this very simplistic kind of adventure that is a fairly linear path that's all about the rapport of our characters and delivering these just classic hero moments. And that's what this movie does so well. The story, like I said, it's fairly straightforward, but that allows for great moments. It allows time to build out the dynamics of our characters and make it about the banter.
I care how you speak, and he's my brother.
He killed 80 people in 2 days.
He's adopted.
The interactions, and then just allowing that straightforward, our guys come together to battle back an army, have the heroic sacrifice, and save the day in the end. It's tried and true classic feel-good formula, but the trick was, how do you combine all the different franchises? And they crack, rock, and they crack, rock. That was a burp in the middle of all of this. And they cracked the code. They figured out how to do it. That's what this movie brought to the table. And it's what so many different franchises have tried to copy ever since. In third place, Captain America Civil War. Now, obviously, the title of this movie is Captain America Civil War. But who is the Civil War between? The members of the Avengers. What is the plot of the movie? Because of the collateral damage from the work of the Avengers, the Sokovia Accords are introduced, and the Avengers have different takes on what they should do with all of this. And what is the final outcome of the movie? The Avengers break up. So while it is very much Captain America's movie and stars Captain America, he is the lead character, he is the protagonist. Also, it is a very, very important Avengers movie. In certain ways, it's more important as an Avengers movie than Age of Ultron is, because this is the movie where they actually break up. But what I absolutely love and adore about this film is that it just does such a fantastic job of being a follow-up to Winter Soldier and Age of Extinction, while setting up Black Panther, while setting up the weakness by which Thanos can show up and the Avengers aren't in place to stop him, as well as creating the foundation for what happens in several other movies, including Black Widow many years later. It has implications for Ant-Man and the Wasp. So many stories are both followed up in this movie as well as set up by this movie, but it also just kind of tells its own story about how would each individual member respond to these accords in light of their past. And in certain ways, there's many ways in which, at face value, Steve and Tony should be on opposite sides of this, based on their foundational worldviews and trust and authority and their tendencies. But because of the journey that each of them has been on, because of what happened in their previous entries in the MCU, they find themselves kind of in opposite places than you would expect. And because the movie does such a good job of creating earned conflict, as audience members, people fall on different sides as to whether Steve or Tony was in the right, who do you sympathize with, who's the cause of the rift, because it's very easy to see where each side is coming from and why they did what they did. That's when you've done something special. And in particular, rewatching this movie this year, I've actually rewatched it 2 times because my son ended up getting very into Captain America and the Marvel movies again. So he wanted to watch it after I had already rewatched it. So I've seen it twice this year. It just reminded me of how good the MCU could be when it was firing on all cylinders and it felt cohesive and like the pieces were all coming together. It could be so fun to just watch all of your toys play together, smash into each other in the airport sequence. But on a storytelling level, it just was something special. They were just doing something that no other franchise has ever done before on this level. Our runner-up, Avengers Endgame. Speaking of movies that were able to do things that had never been done before, Avengers Endgame is the ultimate example of that. As the culmination of 22 films over 11 years, pulling together all these different franchises, and they pulled it off in such a satisfying way that their story group had been tight enough for long enough that they'd left just the right number of kind of like dangling threads here and there, flaws in certain characters, little moments set up in Avengers Age of Ultron, and they were able to find all these things and get the right plot line to pull it together to properly send off this era of Avengers while having a movie that the first hour of it is an exploration of how different characters deal with failure. So it's a movie that actually is about something. How do different people move on? While leading up to a final hour of the film that is possibly the greatest hour of fan service that will ever be put to film. And the reason it's the greatest isn't just because it's so big, but because it's earned. And little moments like Captain America picking up Thor's hammer is so satisfying because it was set up almost accidentally in Age of Ultron. And because of the events of Captain America Civil War, it feels like there's this whole rich backstory that leads to this moment where Captain America can do that, and his friend, who was insecure the first time he was messing with the hammer, is so happy to see his friend do what he's able to do.
I knew it.
It's a movie that sets up its third act so well that even though we know that Thor's already snapped, at the moment, there's a moment in the movie where it looks like all is lost, and the last soldier, Captain America, Steve Rogers, is standing there. He can do this all day. He's got a broken shield and a hammer, and he's going to take on an army all by himself. And then you're on your left, and it's just such a wonderful, powerful moment because of this long journey that we've been on. All, of course, leading up to Tony's ultimate sacrifice, which once again has been set up and developed for 11 years. From Tony in the cave and who he was, and he emerges from the cave a different person. He has to talking to Pepper about that.
I shouldn't be alive unless it was for a reason.
To the first Avengers movie.
You're not the guy to make the sacrifice play.
To even this movie itself, where Tony has moved on. He has a wife, he has a daughter, he has something to live for that's not just himself. And he's still in the moment of having to make the choice. What does it mean to be the sacrificial hero?
I am Iron Man.
And not be the narcissist that's just all about himself. And so they've earned a very powerful moment in a movie that is, of course, filled with fan service and all of just the fun of a zillion characters showing up. But it was truly a special movie, not just for the fans, but because they pulled it off. And it was so good. But coming in at number 1, Avengers Infinity War. Now, when Endgame first came out, it was more of like distinctly Infinity War, a good bit above Endgame, and with time it's much more pretty close. There's a couple things in Endgame that bug me a little bit. The big Thorbowski stuff. But honestly, when I look at Endgame, I just think about all the amazing things that it does now, not the things that annoyed me about the film.
And now, looking back on it, I just remember the good stuff.
But because I don't have those things about Infinity War, it just kind of does inch it out just a little bit. And once again, it's an example, one of the ultimate examples of what the Marvel Cinematic Universe at its best has been able to pull off, which is long-form storytelling. Where in this movie, the only reason it works is because you've set up all of our Avengers and our Guardians before. We already know them, we already love them, we already know their relationships to one another, and we already know what Infinity Stones are. So you can tell this epic movie with a gigantic cast and tell it as a straightforward MacGuffin story about a race to grab these stones. And because we don't need to flesh out and develop our heroes, you can put all that time into our villain and spend all this time making him this tragic madman that you understand where he's coming from. He's crazy. He needs to be stopped. He's wrong. But there's something about what he's doing that's compelling because we understand why he's a true believer in his cause. And we see what it's costing him, that he truly feels that he's lost everything because he so believes in this mission, that he is the savior of the galaxy and what he's doing. And at the end of it, what did it cost you? Everything. But also, as we learned from Endgame, like he's truly content afterwards. I did it. I've done everything that I need to do. I don't need to live any longer. I've already won. I've already done my mission. And there's something very compelling about that. But then, of course, the other side to it, they pulled it off, pulling all these on such a much grander scale. But what they did with the Avengers on this grander scale with the Guardians and the space and everything like that, pulls it all together in such a fun, entertaining way.
I'm Peter, by the way.
Doctor Strange.
Oh, you're using your made-up names. I'm Spider-Man, then.
Where it's so fun to see Doctor Strange joking around with Peter Parker and the Guardians of the Galaxy meeting Tony Stark and seeing how Tony would react to them, and seeing these massive, large-scale battles where Wakanda is battling the army of Thanos, and then Thor shows up in the middle of it. I love the Asgardians of the Galaxy with Thor with the Guardians is such a fun dynamic. Like, all of it works for me. All of it is the example of why I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe so much, and it works on such a high level, and it's a movie that they actually went for it. They allowed the bad guy to win. It ends on such a downer of a note. That's why I love this movie.
He's the best. I love it.
And why the MCU is just so special for so long with what it was able to do. And also, you know, I rode the wave of Phase 3 to, you know, doing this full time on the internet. So I'm eternally grateful for Phase 3 of the internet, or Phase 3 of the internet. Phase 3 of the internet. Phase 3 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And this was a big piece of that. So it comes in at number 1. Be sure to share your ranking down below in the comment section. You can check out my other Marvel rankings right over here. When Fantastic Four comes out, I'm sure I'll do a lot of those bigger, more epic rankings of all the Marvel movies and TV shows all together. But that's coming in July after the final movie of the year. Thank you so much for watching. Keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.